Let's get the views now of the Conservative MP, Chris Philp. Thank you for joining us. What do you make of this appeal to work across the aisle in the House of Commons?
Well, I think it's a call for a more grown-up kind of politics, where instead of standing up and sort of insulting each other, which does sometimes happen, it's rather juvenile, instead what the Prime Minister, I understand, will say is we should come up with constructive ideas that we can agree on, or in some cases, in our country's national interest. And particularly at this quite difficult time with Brexit looming over us, and also some massive intergenerational challenges like social care, like building more houses. You know, I think we should be trying to work on these issues in a mature, sensible way, constructively, where we can, rather than engaging in the very sort of adversarial yaboo politics we've seen in the past.
The problem is we do have adversarial politics. That's why we have elections. And really, this is just a sign of weakness, isn't it?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's a sign of maturity. It's a sign of a Prime Minister who wants to deal with these big issues in a considered and mature way in the national interest, and that's what I think she's looking to do. And of course, there is a lot to deal with. You know, Brexit we've talked about already. You know, but we're also committed to spending £8 billion more on the NHS. Now, you know, Labour should applaud that. Labour should welcome that. Now, they may have ideas about how that money can be spent, but they should be working with us on that extra £8 billion, for example.
How are you going to feel if Jeremy Corbyn wins the next election, but needs a bit of support from Conservatives, and he comes to you and says, work with me to deliver my Labour programme?
Well, clearly the fundamental philosophies are very different. Jeremy Corbyn fought the last election essentially promising to bribe the electorate with their own money. But that doesn't mean there are still areas where we can find common ground, and I think spending £8 billion extra on the NHS is one of those areas. Negotiating good free trade deals around the world is another. And we saw the weekend, perhaps rather surprisingly, but in a good way, the Americans, for instance, and others saying they were very keen to do free trade deals with us. Now, that is something that everybody in Parliament should be able to get behind.
I mean, I don't know whether they've got the clip of this, but it is interesting that Jeremy Corbyn, when he first became Labour leader and was in a weak position, I mean, he seemed to say very similar things about cooperation, which, since he's done rather better in the polls, has disappeared.
Well, look, I'm not a student of how Jeremy Corbyn's conducted his leadership. What interests me is making sure we do the right thing for our country. And I do think, I mean, there are a lot of very experienced and smart people in the House of Commons on both sides. And if we can harness all of that talent, energy, enthusiasm and creativity where we can find common ground, then that seems to make sense. But that isn't to paper over the cracks. I mean, there are clearly some pretty fundamental differences of view between, you know, someone like John McDonnell and, you know...
I mean, wouldn't it be better, frankly, for Mrs May to admit that she's been rebuffed by the voters and to go and at least give us a new leader that perhaps the country could get behind?
No, I don't accept that at all. I mean, don't forget, she did actually, you know, she did win the election. She got 318 seats.
She came first. She didn't win it.
She came first. Well, look, in a race, coming first means winning, and Labour came second, a decent second, but they got 56 fewer seats. They got nearly 1 million fewer votes. And don't forget, just 2 years ago, David Cameron got 331 MPs. Theresa May only got 13 fewer than that, and with David Cameron's result was seen as some amazing victory, and this has been not seen in that way, despite the fact we've got almost the same number of MPs now as we had before.
David Cameron lost the referendum by almost the same margin as Mrs May is now challenged by Jeremy Corbyn, and he went.
Well, he did go, and that was because on a massive national issue, he lost the referendum. But as you said, Theresa May came first in the election just a few weeks ago. And look, talking to parliamentary colleagues at the 1922 committee immediately after the election and in the 3 or 4 weeks since then, there is no appetite or desire whatsoever for any kind of change. And the stuff we've seen in the weekend press, I think, is just completely without foundation.
So how long can the country go on with a Prime Minister who is there on the sufferance of her MPs and can't deliver a programme without appealing to the Labour Party?
Well, she can deliver a programme. I think what she's saying to the Labour Party and other people in Parliament is if you have constructive ideas to contribute, please contribute those ideas. Don't just throw stones in a destructive way. There are loads of things we can deliver. I mean, you know, more home building, extra £8 billion for the NHS, record increases in the minimum wage. The jobs figures come out on Wednesday. We've got 40-year low unemployment. Those are all things we can deliver despite the difficult parliamentary arithmetic.
5 years of Theresa May up until 2022 in the next election.
A positive, energetic programme that is in our country's interests.
And for how long?
Well, I mean, we've got a 5-year parliament, and I think it will go for 5 years.
Under Mrs May?
Well, look, I'm not in the business of making political predictions. I thought that Donald Trump would never become US president, that we'd vote to remain and that we'd get a landslide 6 weeks ago. So I'm not making political predictions. But what I can say with certainty is there is no appetite for any kind of change and everyone is fully behind her.
Yes, Philp, thank you very much indeed for joining us.